Wolves do not scream. They have no voice for it. But trapped behind 6 inches of burning oak on the 6th level of my own tower, my pack was making a sound I had never heard, a high, broken keening that clawed at something behind my ribs and would not stop. I remember the exact moment I understood that I could not reach them. The feast had been a small one. Midsummer Eve, 20 of my bannermen roast elk, and a cask of blackberry wine my steward Brennan had been saving since the frost broke. The ash spire, my fortress, 7 levels carved into the gorge wall above the Vale River, had stood for 9 generations. Its stone was river granite, dense as iron. Fire had never troubled it. What fire had never troubled was the stone. The oil stores on level 5 were another matter. I do not know who toppled the brazier. Perhaps a servant carrying linens. Perhaps a gust from the river draft that whips through the lower passages when the gorge wind turns. It does not matter now. What matters is that a single flame touched the edge of a linen cart. The cart sat 3 paces from 20 barrels of rendered tallow. And by the time the first shout reached the great hall on level 3, level 5 was an oven, and the stairway above it had become a chimney drawing fire upward into the kennels on 6. My wolves, 14 of them, including Ashmark, my silver werewolf who had fought beside me since I was 19, were on level 6. I was on my feet before the shout finished. My bannermen were already moving, chairs toppling, wine pooling across the oak table. I took the main stair 3 steps at a time. My captain, Jorik, was behind me. By the time we reached the landing on 4, the heat was a wall. Not warmth, not discomfort, a wall. The air itself was orange. The stone radiated heat that I could feel through the soles of my boots, and the stairway above, the only stairway wide enough for a man in armor, was a column of flame. Fire rolled along the ceiling in waves, feeding on the oil vapors that rose from the stores below. The sound was a low, sustained roar, like the gorge rapids but drier, hungrier. And above it the wolves keening. "Buckets," Jorik said, and I could hear in his voice that he already knew buckets would not be enough. "The cistern on 5, I said. Every level of the ash spire had a stone cistern built into its interior wall, river water, hand-pumped, for washing and for exactly this. But the cistern on 5 was behind the fire. Level 6 had its own, smaller, but the wolves could not open a valve. Jorik sent 4 men to try the East Servant Passage, a narrow cut through the rock that connected levels 3 and 5 on the gorge side. They came back in minutes, coughing, eyes streaming. The passage was intact, but the smoke was so thick a man could not see his own hand. One of them, a young guard named Pell, had made it 20 steps before the heat seared the hair from his forearm and he had to turn back. I tried myself. I will not pretend otherwise. I went into that passage with a soaked cloak over my head and my teeth clenched and my wolf raging inside me, not the careful, patient presence he usually was, but something frantic, tearing at my chest as though he wanted to leap from my body and run through the stone itself. I made it further than Pell. The walls were hot enough to blister. The smoke tasted of rendered fat, sweet and choking. I could hear the wolves more clearly now. The keening had dropped into something lower, something that sounded like resignation. My wolf threw himself against my ribs so hard I staggered. Jorik and Brennan dragged me back. I stood on the landing of level 4, smoke pouring past me, ash in my hair, my palms blistered from touching the wall, and I understood that I was going to stand here and listen to my wolves die. That is when I saw her. She came up the main stair from below, not running but moving with a kind of deliberate purpose that made the men on the landing step aside without thinking. She was small, brown hair tied back with a strip of linen, a plain dress, the kind the kitchen staff wore, though I would learn later she was not kitchen staff. She carried a leather satchel over one shoulder and a brass ring with 9 keys on her belt. I had seen her before. I was sure of it. Somewhere in the corridors of my own fortress, passing with a lit taper, her face half lit, her eyes down. I had never learned her name. She walked to the entrance of the East Servant Passage, the same passage that had burned the hair from Pell's arm, and she paused, not with fear, with calculation. She tilted her head as though she were listening to the fire itself, reading its breathing the way a sailor reads the wind. Then she reached into her satchel, pulled out a square of soaked canvas, and pressed it over her nose and mouth. "Hold," I said. She looked at me, gray eyes steady. "You cannot go up there," I said. "The heat drove my men back. It will kill you." She said, "I know the watercuts, my lord." I did not know what that meant. She did not wait for me to ask. She turned and walked into the passage, and the smoke swallowed her whole. And in the moment before she disappeared, I felt something I had no name for, not my wolf stirring, not the bond I had heard other alphas describe, but a sudden, violent wrongness, as though something essential had just walked away from me, and the world had tilted to let it go. "Who is she?" I said. No one on the landing knew. It was Brennan, my steward, who answered a full minute later, out of breath and flipping through the staff ledger he carried everywhere. "Elda Varn," he said, "lamp tender. She fills and trims the oil lamps and torches, levels 1 through 7. She has been here 2 years. Came from a village downstream, Pauleth, the one the spring flood took." "A lamp tender," I said. "She requested the wolf kennel rotation specifically," Brennan added, and I heard something careful in his tone, as though he were remembering details he had not thought important before. "The wolves are calmer when she does the evening rounds. The kennel master mentioned it once. I did not think to report it." I stared at the passage where she had disappeared. The smoke churned, the fire roared, the wolves keened. And I waited. I am not a man who waits well. 9 years I had been king of Brennholt, since my father's death in the border skirmish with the Essen raiders, and in those 9 years I had built a reputation for 2 things: patience in council and ferocity in the field. My bannermen trusted me because I did not move until I was certain, and when I moved, I did not stop. My council had brought me 7 women in those 9 years, each of them well-born, each of them willing, each of them perfectly suited to be Luna of Brennholt. I had refused everyone, not because they were lacking, because something in me, something deeper than reason, deeper than duty, had simply refused to respond. My wolf would examine each woman the way a jeweler examines a stone, and then he would turn away. Not interested, not even close. And I had learned over 9 years to trust that silence. The mate bond was real. I had seen it in my father and mother, the way they turned toward each other in a crowded room as though pulled by a thread only they could feel. I would wait for that. I could afford to wait. But I could not wait here, on this landing, while a woman I had never spoken to walked into a fire that had defeated every warrior in my fortress. "Ropes," I said to Jorik, "and every soaked blanket you can find. If she is not back in 10 minutes, I am going in after her." Jorik opened his mouth to argue. He looked at my face and closed it again. The minutes stretched. The fire did not lessen. Smoke continued to pour from the passage, and from above the wolves' keening had changed. It was thinner now, fainter, and that thinness was worse than the full-throated cry because it meant they were weakening. My wolf paced inside me, a low whine building in my chest that I could feel in my jaw. 7 minutes. 8. At 9 minutes, I reached for the soaked cloak Jorik held out. I was wrapping it around my forearm when a shape moved in the passage mouth. Elda Varn came out of the smoke, carrying a wolf across her shoulders. The wolf was a young female, Brindle, one of my scouts, lean and gray-furred, her tongue lolling and her eyes glazed from smoke. Elda lowered her to the stone floor with a care that I would remember later, her hands gentle on the wolf's ribs, checking the breathing with the flat of her palm. Brindle coughed twice and then her eyes focused. Elda's dress was blackened. Her hair had come loose and was filmed with ash. Soot marked her face in streaks, but her skin, I noticed this and did not understand it, her skin was whole. No blisters, no burns. The passage had seared the hair from Pell's arm in 20 steps, And this woman had gone all the way to level 6 and come back carrying a wolf, and her hands were unmarked. "There are 13 more," she said. Her voice was steady, smoke-roughened but steady. "The kennel doors are latched, but the bolts are hot. I used the water cuts. There are channels carved into the walls that feed the cisterns. I opened 2 of them. It is not enough to douse the fire, but it has cooled the passage near the kennels." "The water cuts," Jorek said. He had served in the Ashspire for 15 years. He was looking at Elda as though she had spoken a language he did not recognize. "They are behind the lamp panels," she said. "The stone slides, every level has them. They were part of the original construction in case of fire." She paused. "No one uses them anymore. The valves are stiff. I oil them when I do the lamps." She had been maintaining a 9-generation-old fire suppression system that my own engineers had forgotten existed. She had been doing it quietly, on her own, as part of her lamp rounds, because she understood fire. "I need to go back," she said. "No," I said. She looked at me with those gray eyes, and I realized 2 things at once. The first was that she was not asking my permission. She was informing me. The second was that my wolf had gone completely still. Not the restless pacing of the last 9 years, not the frantic clawing of the last 10 minutes, but a stillness so total that for a moment I thought he had simply stopped, the way a compass needle stops when it finds north. She turned and walked back into the smoke. I let her go. I do not know why. Every instinct I had as a king, as an alpha, as a man, told me to grab her arm, to order her back, to send my warriors in her place. But something deeper than instinct, something that lived in the same place my wolf had gone quiet, understood that she would make it and they would not, that this was hers to do. I hated it. I stood on that landing with my fists clenched and the fire's heat on my face, and I hated every second of it. She came back in 6 minutes with 2 more wolves, Fenner and Galt, brothers from the same litter, both young, both dazed but breathing. She laid them beside Brindle and went back without a word. The third trip she brought 3, small wolves, the yearlings. She had fashioned a lead from rope she must have found on level 5 and tied them together, guiding them down the passage in a line. They pressed against her legs as she emerged, shaking but trusting, and the look on her ash-covered face when she knelt to check them. The tenderness of it, the absolute focus, made something in my chest crack open that I did not know had been sealed shut. "The smoke is thicker," she said, unwinding the rope. "The water cuts are holding the passage clear enough, but the upper stairway is failing. I have perhaps 2 more trips before it collapses." "How many are left?" 8, including Ashmark. He will not leave the others." Of course he would not. My great silver wolf, the one who had stood over my father's body and would not let the raiders approach, the one who had carried me home after the river ambush with an arrow in his own flank, he would not leave the yearlings. He would stay until the last one was safe, and then he would stay longer because that was who he was. "Can you carry him?" I said. Ashmark weighed as much as she did, more. "I will manage, my lord." "Thuron," I said, and I did not know why I said it. Kings do not give their first name to lamp tenders on smoke-filled landings in the middle of a crisis. But the word came out as though it had been waiting, and she looked at me, really looked, not the eyes-down deference she must have been trained to. And for a moment the fire and the smoke and the keening fell away, and there was just her face, ash-streaked and lit from beneath by the glow of the passage, and those gray eyes, and the stillness in my wolf that I was beginning to understand was not stillness at all but recognition. "Thuron," she repeated quietly, as though testing how the word felt. Then she turned and went back into the fire. The 4th trip took longer, 12 minutes. I know because I counted everyone, standing at the passage mouth with the soaked cloak in my hands and Jorek's hand on my shoulder, not restraining me, not anymore, but anchoring me, because my whole body was vibrating with something I could not name and did not want to examine. My wolf had settled into a focused, unwavering attention. every fiber of his awareness aimed at that passage like a bowstring drawn but not released. She came back with 4 wolves, 2 adults, 2 yearlings. The adults were limping. One of them, a heavy-set gray named Torva, had singed fur along her flank. Elda's hands were shaking now, I could see it, a fine tremor that she could not quite control, but her voice was still steady when she said, 4 left. Ashmark and 3 that cannot walk. The passage, I said. Holding, barely. She coughed, deep and wet, and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. The water cuts are running low. The cistern on 6 is nearly empty. Then this is the last trip. Yes. I stepped toward the passage. I am coming with you. No, she said, and her voice was different now, not the quiet deference of a lamp tender addressing her king, but something rower, something that sounded almost fierce. You cannot. The servant passage narrows past the 5th turn. Your shoulders will not clear it. I measured it when I was laying the lamps 2 years ago. It is 41 inches. You are wider than that. She had measured the passage width 2 years ago while laying lamps. I will fit, I said. You will not, my lord. And if you become stuck, I cannot move you and I cannot get past you, and then your wolves die and so do we. She was right. I knew it the way I knew my own name. The servant passages were built for servants, smaller frames, quick movements, no armor. I was broad through the chest and shoulders. I had tried the passage once, years ago, out of curiosity, and I had scraped the stone on both sides. Please, she said, and the word was so soft I almost missed it. Let me bring them home. I stepped back. She went. This time I did not count the minutes. I stood at the passage mouth and I closed my eyes and I listened, not to the fire, not to the keening which had grown very faint now, but to something beneath all of it, a thread of awareness that ran from my chest down through the stone and into the dark, following her. I could feel her. I did not understand how or why, but I could feel her moving through the passage, the careful placement of her feet, the way she ducked beneath a hot lintel, the moment she reached the kennel door and pushed it open with her shoulder because her hands were too raw to grip the iron. I could feel her and my wolf could feel her, and somewhere in the burning darkness between us, the thread pulled taut and sang. She was gone for 18 minutes. At 14, Jorek said my name, and I shook my head without opening my eyes. At 16, Brennan said, "My lord, the upper stairway," and the crash that finished his sentence was a section of stone collapsing on level 5, sending a gust of superheated air through the passage that made every man on the landing flinch and cover his face. At 17, I heard the wolves before I heard her. A low, broken sound, not keening now but something softer, almost a murmur, the sound a wolf makes when it is being carried by someone it trusts. She came out of the passage carrying Ashmark. My silver war wolf, 80 pounds of muscle and fur, draped across her shoulders with his great head hanging and his eyes half closed, his breathing shallow but steady. She had him balanced the way a shepherd carries a lamb, her hands locked on his forelegs and hind legs, her back bent under his weight, her steps careful and deliberate. Behind her, on a rope lead, came the last 3 wolves, 2 limping, one dragging a hind leg, pressing close to her ankles as though she were the only solid thing left in the world. She made it 4 steps past the passage mouth before her legs gave. I caught her. I do not mean that I moved to catch her. I was already there. I was already reaching. My body had made the decision before my mind caught up, and when she folded, I was the thing she folded into, my arms around her, an Ashmark sliding from her shoulders into Jorek's waiting hands, and the 3 wolves pressing against my legs, whining, and the passage behind us, belching a final gout of flame as the ceiling on level 5 surrendered. She was in my arms. She weighed nothing. She smelled of smoke and lamp oil and something else, something clean beneath the soot, like river stone in morning sun, and my wolf, the wolf who had been silent and watchful for these long minutes, lifted his head inside me and howled. Not the war howl, not the hunting cry. The mate call. The sound an alpha wolf makes once in his life when the bond he was born to carry finally lands. And every wolf on the landing, the 14 she had pulled from the fire, smoke-dazed and trembling and sprawled across the stone, lifted their heads and answered. I looked down at Elda Varn. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was ragged. Ash coated her face and her hair and her hands, and I could see now what I had been noticing all along without understanding. Her skin was whole, not just unburned, untouched. The fire had blackened her dress, singed the ends of her hair, coated her in soot and smoke. But beneath it, her skin was smooth and unmarked, as though the flame had parted around her the way water parts around a stone. The bond had been protecting her, before either of us knew it existed. I carried her to the courtyard. The whole of Brennholt was there, my bannermen, the servants, the guards who had been running water from the river, the kitchen staff who had come out when the smoke reached the lower levels. Torches lit the gorge walls in leaping orange, and the Vale River roared below, and above us the ash spire's upper levels burned against the stars. I laid her on a cloak that someone, I think it was Brennan, spread on the flagstones. I knelt beside her. Her breathing was evening out, the deep wet cough subsiding into something steadier, and when I took her hand, the mark, it came like sunrise. Gold first, a thin line of warmth that traced itself across my left wrist in a pattern I had seen only in my mother's old illuminated books, the mate mark of the Alpha line. It burned, but not with fire. With recognition. With the feeling of a lock turning and a door opening onto a room you had always known was there, but could never find. On her wrist the same mark, the same gold, blazing through the soot like a lamp lit behind a curtain. Her eyes opened. She looked at her wrist, she looked at mine, she looked at me. "Oh," she said. I am told that the courtyard went silent. I did not notice. I was looking at her face, the gray eyes wide now, not with fear but with the same stunned recognition I felt hammering through my own chest, and my wolf was howling inside me, a sustained, joyful, broken sound, and the 14 wolves she had saved were getting to their feet slowly, painfully, and coming toward us. Not toward me, toward her. They circled her where she lay on the cloak, pressing close, noses touching her arms, her ankles, the hem of her dress, and one by one they lay down around her, a ring of wolves, a living wall, smoke-stained and exhausted, and choosing her with an unanimity that left no room for doubt. She was theirs, she had always been theirs. The wolves had known it for 2 years. I had been the blind one. "My lord," Brennan's voice somewhere behind me, careful, "the mark." "I can see it, Brennan." "The entire court can see it, my lord." I looked up. He was right. Every face in the courtyard was turned toward us, my bannermen, my guards, the servants, the stable hands, the kitchen staff, and on every face was the same expression. Not surprise exactly. Something closer to the feeling you get when a piece of a puzzle you did not know was incomplete suddenly slots into place, and the whole picture makes sense for the first time. The wolves had been calm around her. My wolf had been restless for 2 years, pacing, searching, turning toward something he could not find. The oil lamps had been tended with a care that bordered on devotion, every passage lit, every flame trimmed, the ancient water cuts oiled and maintained by a woman who understood fire better than anyone in my fortress, and who had been walking the same corridors as me for 730 days. 730 days. I had passed her in hallways. I had seen her shadow on the stairwell walls, her tapers glow retreating around a corner. I had caught the scent of lamp oil and river stone and felt my wolf stir, and I had thought it was nothing. I had thought it was the wind. 730 days she had been here, and I had never asked her name. I stood. My hands were shaking, which they had not done during the fire, which they had not done during any of the battles I had fought or the crises I had weathered in 9 years of kingship. They shook now. I pulled the cloak from my shoulders, the gray wolf fur mantle that was the Alpha's mark of office, the one my father had worn and his father before him, and I knelt again and wrapped it around her. Eldevarn, I said, my voice carried across the silent courtyard. Lamp tender of the ash-spire, the one my wolves chose, the one the fire could not touch. I paused. The words that came next were not rehearsed. They were not the formal claiming speech that my father had spoken to my mother, or the ceremonial language that the old texts prescribed. They were just the truth. You are my mate. You have always been my mate, and every day that I walked past you without seeing it is a day I will spend the rest of my life regretting. She stared at me. The cloak, my cloak, the alpha's mantle, pooled around her shoulders, far too large, and beneath the soot her face was pale and stunned. I am a lamp tender, she said. You are the woman who walked through fire for my wolves and came out unburned, I said. You are the woman who maintained a fire suppression system that my own engineers forgot existed. You are the woman my wolf has been searching for since the moment you set foot in this fortress. And if you will have me, my voice broke. I who had spoken to war councils and border lords and the assembled bannermen of the gorge without a tremor, could not finish the sentence. If you will have me, you are the Luna of Brennhold. The wolves around her lifted their heads. Ashmark, my great silver wolf, who had refused to leave the others, who had let her carry him through fire and smoke and a collapsing passage, dragged himself to his feet and walked 3 steps to where I knelt. He leaned his massive head against my chest for a moment, and then he turned and went to her, and he lay down with his chin on her knee. I had never seen him do that, not for me, not for my father, not for anyone. Elda looked at Ashmark. She looked at the circle of wolves. She looked at the mark on her wrist, still glowing gold. She looked at me. Yes, she said. And in the silence that followed, the fire still burning above us, the river still roaring below, the stars still turning over the gorge, every wolf in the courtyard howled. Not the keening, not the war cry, the mate song, the sound a pack makes when it is complete. I helped her to her feet. She wobbled. 18 minutes in a burning tower carrying an 80-pound wolf will do that, and I steadied her, my arm around her waist, the wolf fur cloak dragging on the flagstones because she was a full head shorter than me, and the cloak had been cut for a tall man's shoulders. The fire, she said, looking up at the ash spire. The upper levels still burned, though more slowly now. The oil stores had been consumed, and the flames were finding less fuel in the raw stone. We'll keep, I said. The water cuts on level 3 are still open. If your men close the passage doors and let the river feed do its work. Elda. She stopped. The fire will keep, I said again. You will sit down, you will drink water, you will let the healer look at your lungs. And then I paused. And then I will ask you every question I should have asked 2 years ago. She looked at me with those gray eyes, and I saw something in them that I did not expect. Not wonder, not gratitude. A steady, quiet warmth, as though she had been carrying a lamp in a dark corridor for a very long time, and someone had finally noticed the light. You will have a great many questions, she said. Yes. I tend the lamps, she said, as though this were the most important thing. I have always tended the lamps, even when I did not know why the wolves were calm around me, or why the fire never burned me when I trimmed the torches, or why she stopped. She swallowed. I thought I was just careful. You were more than careful, I said. You were destined. She shook her head, not denying it but absorbing it, the way the gorge stone absorbs river water slowly down to the foundation. I led her to the stone bench by the courtyard well. Jorik brought water. The healer, old Marin, who had delivered me and most of my bannermen's children, knelt beside Elda, and listened to her breathing and checked her hands, and looked at me over her shoulder with an expression I had never seen on her weathered face. Not a burn on her, Marin said. Not one. I have seen men pulled from lesser fires with their lungs ruined. This girl breathed that smoke for the better part of an hour, and her lungs are clear. The bond, I said. The bond, Marin agreed. I have read about it. I never thought I would see it. The mate bond shields the true mate from what would destroy anyone else. It has been in the old texts for generations, my lord. We thought it was a story. It is not a story, I said. No, Marin looked at Elda. It is not. The fire burned through the night. My men followed Elda's instructions, closed the passage doors, opened the water cuts on level 3, let the river-fed channels do their slow, steady work. By dawn, the upper levels were smoldering, not burning. By mid-morning, the smoke had thinned enough for my engineers to go up and assess the damage. Level 5, the oil stores was gutted. Level 6, the kennels was scorched but intact. The stone had held. The ancient fire suppression system that Elda had been quietly maintaining for 2 years had saved the upper fortress. The engineers came back down with expressions that mixed professional embarrassment with reluctant awe. They had not known about the water cuts. The carved channels behind the lamp panels, the sliding stone covers, the copper valves connecting the interior cisterns to the river feed. All of it had been part of the original Ashspire design, built by the first brass king 9 generations ago, and over the centuries it had been forgotten. Panels were plastered over. Cisterns were used for storage. The valves rusted shut. Elda had found them her first week, while mapping the lamp routes. She had oiled them, cleared the channels, tested the water flow. She had done it because she understood fire, because she had grown up in Paulith, the river village, where the houses were timber and thatch and a single spark could take a street, and she had learned young that the only safety against fire was preparation. She had not told anyone because she had not thought anyone would listen. She was a lamp tender. Who would listen to a lamp tender? My engineers would listen now. I did not sleep that night, partly because the Ashspire was still smoldering and a king does not sleep while his fortress burns, but mostly because I sat on the courtyard bench beside Elda Varn, the wolf fur cloak still around her shoulders, a cup of water in her soot-stained hands, Ashmark lying at her feet like a great silver rug, and I asked my questions. She told me about Paulith, the village built where the vale widened, timber houses on stilts, a good life until the spring melt came too fast and too hard. The flood took everything in an afternoon. She had walked for 6 days to reach Brenholt, carrying nothing but the clothes she wore and a brass key ring her mother had given her, the same key she now used for the Ashspire's lamp panels. She had asked for work. Brennan had given her the lamp rounds because no one else wanted them. 7 levels of stairways, twice a day, dawn and dusk, carrying oil and tapers and a trimming knife. I did not mind, she said. The Ashspire is beautiful. The way the light falls through the river spray on level 2 in the morning, have you seen it? I had lived here my whole life. I had not seen it. And the wolves, she said, her voice softened. They came to me on the first evening round. I was filling the lamps on level 6 and they were watching me through the kennel grating. I thought they would growl. They did not. They pressed their noses through the bars and let me touch them. The kennel master said you had a way with them, I said. I talked to them, she said simply. That is all. I told them about my day, about the lamp that would not stay lit on the 3rd level west corridor. The draft from the river catches it every time, and the sunset I saw from the 7th level window, and the eagle that nests in the gorge wall below level 1. They listened. They more than listened, I said. They chose you. She was quiet for a moment. Ashmark sighed in his sleep, a long, contented breath. The mate mark on her wrist glowed faintly, a warm gold like a lamp flame seen through stone. I did not know what it meant, she said. I thought they were lonely. I thought they liked the sound of a voice. They liked the sound of your voice, I said. Specifically yours. They have a full kennel staff, a kennel master who has served for 30 years. They barely tolerate him. They walk beside you. She looked at her hands, calloused, small, unmarked despite an hour in a burning tower. The fire, she said. I have never been burned, not once. I thought she stopped, started again. When I was young in Paulith, a candle fell and caught the curtain. I reached into the flame to pull the curtain down. My mother screamed, but the fire did not touch me. She said I was lucky. You were not lucky, I said. You were marked. Marked. The bond protects. It is in the old texts, the same texts that describe the water cuts, the same texts my own people forgot. The mate bond, when it is true, shields the true mate from harm. Fire, cold, venom, whatever would take her from her alpha, the bond will not allow it. Before the bond is even known, she said. Before it is known, I confirmed. From birth, some say. The bond does not wait for recognition. It waits for nothing. It is simply there doing its work whether anyone sees it or not. She looked at me. In the torchlight, with the soot slowly drying on her face and the cloak pooled around her, and the wolves sleeping at her feet, she looked like something out of one of the illuminated books in my father's library, the old stories of the first Lunas, the women who walked with wolves and spoke to rivers, and held the pack together not with strength, but with a kind of quiet, unbreakable steadiness. You walked past me, she said, not accusing, just a fact. I did. Many times. Yes. I thought, she paused, took a breath. I thought kings do not see lamp tenders. I thought that was how it was meant to be. It is not how it was meant to be, I said, and I am sorry. She shook her head. You are king. You have a kingdom. You have wars and councils and borders and bannermen. A woman who fills lamps and talks to wolves. I am not the sort of person a king would notice. You are exactly the sort of person a king should notice, I said, and I was blind. We sat in silence for a while. The ash spire smoldered above us and the river roared below and the wolves slept in their circle and the stars turned over the gorge. I could feel the bond now, not just the mark on my wrist, but the living thread of it, running between us like a current in the river, steady and warm and older than either of us. It did not demand. It did not press. It simply was, the way the river is, the way the stone is, the way the light falls through the spray on level 2 in the morning. I had waited 9 years for this. I had turned away 7 women my counsel brought me. I had endured Brennan's worried looks and Jorik's blunt suggestions, and my mother's portrait watching me from the wall of the great hall. I had waited because my wolf would not settle, because the bond had not come, because the room I was looking for remained shut. She had been here, 2 years, filling lamps and talking to wolves and oiling the valves that would save my fortress. She had been here the whole time. In the days that followed, the ash spire was repaired. The oil stores on level 5 were rebuilt with stone vaulting and proper ventilation. The kennels on 6 were cleaned and restored. The water cuts were mapped, catalogued, and integrated into the fortress maintenance schedule. Every engineer in Brennholt was required to learn them. Elda supervised this personally. She knew the system better than anyone alive. The court adjusted, slowly. My bannermen were men of the gorge, practical, stubborn, loyal. They had watched a lamp tender walk into a fire that defeated their best warriors and emerge unburned. They had seen the mate mark blaze. They had heard the wolves' mate song. These were not men who argued with destiny. One by one they knelt to her, not because I commanded it, but because she had earned it. She had saved the pack. She had walked through fire. Elda accepted their respect the way she accepted everything, quietly, with a nod and a steady gaze and no false modesty, but no swagger either. She did not play the Luna. She simply was one, the way she had simply been the woman who maintained the water cuts and talked to wolves. Some people carry authority like a cloak they put on. Elda carried it like the lamp oil in her satchel, quietly, as part of the work. She kept her keys. That was the thing that cracked my heart wide open, more than the fire, more than the wolves, more than the mate mark blazing gold on her wrist. She kept the brass ring with 9 keys that opened the lamp panels throughout the ash spire, and she still carried her trimming knife and her satchel of wicks and flints. She was Luna of Brennholt, and she still tended the lamps. Not all of them. I drew the line at 7 levels twice a day. But the upper stairways, levels 5 through 7, the rebuilt sections, the passages she had walked through fire to clear, those she kept. Every evening, as the sun dropped behind the gorge wall and the shadows climbed the ash spire, she would climb the stairs with her satchel and her keys and light the lamps one by one, and the wolves would follow her, padding up the steps in a loose, contented line, and I would hear the faint sound of her voice drifting down the stairwell, telling them about her day. I sometimes followed. Not to protect her, she needed no protection. The bond and the wolves and her own formidable competence saw to that. I followed because the sight of her lighting lamps in the upper corridors, the click of the key, the slide of the panel, the careful trim of the wick, the small flame catching and steadying and filling the passage with warm gold, was the most peaceful thing I had ever seen. It was the opposite of everything a king's life was built around. The councils, the borders, the calculated alliances, the weight of 9 generations of brass leadership pressing down on my shoulders. Eld attending lamps was simple and essential and good, and it made my wolf lie down inside me with a contentment he had never known. The wolves followed her everywhere, not just during the lamp rounds. In the mornings when she walked the courtyard, a loose knot of them trailed behind her, Brindle and Fenner and Galt and the yearlings, and always Ashmark, my great silver wolf, who had abandoned his post at the foot of my bed, where he had slept since he was a pup and now slept at the foot of hers. I could have been offended. I was not. Ashmark had carried my burdens for 12 years. He had earned the right to choose his rest. She learned the names of every wolf. She learned their injuries, Torva's singed flank, the yearling with the dragging hind leg, and she worked with old Marin to treat them, her hands steady and gentle, her voice low. The wolves that had been most frightened in the fire, the ones who had keened and cowered and given up, were the ones who followed her most closely. They trusted her the way they trusted the stone beneath their feet, absolutely and without reservation. My bannermen's wives took to her. She was not what they expected. She had no noble bearing, no training in court manners, no wardrobe beyond her 2 working dresses and the wolf fur cloak I had given her, but she had something else. She listened. She remembered names. She asked after sick children and aging parents, and the small domestic concerns that a king's court usually overlooked. She brought lamps to the lower quarters where the servants lived, replacing the smoky tallow candles with clean oil lamps that burned brighter and did not stink. She organized the rebuilding of the servants' passage on level 2, which had been cramped and poorly lit for decades. She did these things not as gestures of noble charity, but as the natural continuation of the work she had always done, tending the light, keeping the passages clear, making sure no one was left in the dark. The mate bond settled between us like the river into its gorge, slowly, deeply, carving a channel that would be there forever. I learned her silences and her small gestures, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the way she touched the mate mark on her wrist when she was uncertain, the way she said my name in the quiet of the evening, not my lord or my king, but Thuron, as though the word were a lamp she was lighting. I learned that she was braver than I was. Not in the way of battle. I had my own kind of courage, the kind that holds a line and makes a decision and does not flinch. But the courage to walk into a burning tower alone, to carry a wolf twice her weight down a collapsing passage, to emerge into a courtyard full of strangers, and accept a destiny she had never imagined, that was a different thing. That was a courage of the heart, the kind that does not announce itself, the kind that simply does what must be done and does not think to call it bravery. "You were not afraid," I said to her once, weeks later, standing on the 7th level balcony where the gorge wind blew and the stars were so close you could almost touch them. "In the fire, you were not afraid." She thought about it. "I was afraid," she said, "but the wolves were more afraid and they were trapped, and I knew the way." "Would you have gone if you did not know the way?" "Yes." "Why?" She looked out at the gorge. The river was a silver thread far below, and the moonlight turned the canyon walls to pewter. Because they were alive, she said, and the fire was taking them. And I could do something about it. She paused. That is all, Thuron. There is no grand reason. If something is alive and in danger and you can help, you help. That is what lamps are for. That is what light is for. I took her hand. The mate marks on our wrists glowed faintly, gold on gold, like two lamps answering each other across a dark corridor. That, I said, is what a Luna is for. She smiled. It was a rare thing, Elda's smile, not because she was unhappy but because she did not give it lightly. It came slowly, like a lamp catching, and when it arrived it changed her whole face, and my wolf answered it with a warmth that I felt in my bones. The formal ceremony was held a month after the fire, when the ash spire was repaired and the wolves were healed. It was not a grand affair. Elda did not want grandeur, and I had never been a man for spectacle. We stood in the courtyard, the same courtyard where I had knelt beside her and wrapped my cloak around her shoulders, and the bannermen stood in a half circle, and the wolves lay at our feet, and old Marin bound our wrists with a strip of river reed in the old way, and the mate marks blazed gold. The court that had watched her carry wolves from a burning tower did not need to be told what they were witnessing. They knew. They had seen her walk through fire. They had seen the wolves choose her. They had watched her, in the weeks since, tend the lamps and mend the passages and care for the pack with a quiet, relentless devotion that asked for nothing and gave everything. When the binding was done and the wolves howled the mate song and the bannermen thumped their fists on their chests in the gorge salute, Elda looked at me with those gray eyes and said, "I should light the upper lamps. It is nearly dusk." "Now," I said. "The lamps do not care about ceremonies, Thuron." I laughed. I, the Alpha King of Brennholt, who had been told by 7 well-born women and 3 concerned council members that I needed to choose a mate before the line ended, laughed in the middle of my own binding ceremony because my Luna wanted to go tend the lamps. "Then we will light them together," I said. And we climbed the stairs, the rebuilt stairs, the stone still pale where the fire damage had been patched, and she opened the lamp panels with her brass keys, and I held the tapers while she trimmed the wicks, and the wolves padded behind us in a warm, loose line, and the ash spire filled with light level by level, and the mate marks on our wrists glowed softly in the lamplight, and the river roared far below, and the gorge wind carried the scent of lamp oil and river stone, and something I would never again mistake for nothing. There is a detail that Brennan tells when visitors ask how the Luna of Brennholt came to be. He tells the story of the fire, the trapped wolves, the failed warriors, the lamp tender who walked through the flames. He tells it well. But he always ends with the same detail, because Brennan is a steward and stewards care about records. In his ledger, the great leather-bound book where he logs every expenditure, every appointment, every event in the ash spire's daily life, the entry for that midsummer night reads, "Oil stores lost total level 5. Kennel damage moderate level 6 repaired in 12 days. Wolves recovered all 14, no casualties. Watercut system operational, mapped, cataloged. Lamp tender Eldevarn reclassified." Reclassified, that is Brennan's word for it. The word he did not write, the word that lives not in ledgers but in the way she climbs the stairs every evening with her keys and her satchel and her wolves, in the way the lamps of the ash spire burn steady and true, in the way my wolf lies quiet and whole inside me for the first time in my life, is the word that matters. She is the light I did not know I was living without. She is the lamp that no fire could extinguish. She is my Luna, and she always was, and the 730 days I spent walking past her are the only darkness the ash spire has ever truly known. She is tending the upper lamps now. I can hear her on the stairway, her footsteps light, her keys clicking softly, her voice a murmur as she tells the wolves about the eagle on the gorge wall and the sunset she saw from the 7th level window, and the draft on the 3rd level west corridor that still catches the lamp flame every time. I should go help her. The tapers are heavy, and the wicks need trimming, and the light will not tend itself.